you very much, Councillor Meggs, for those words on behalf of the City of Vancouver. I think one thing that I really drew from that was this notion of how in Hogan's Alley there was this notion of inclusivity. And I think that resonates a lot with the people of African descent, because certainly Africa is a very, very diverse place, linguistically, culturally, socially, politically. But we always find the ability to include others in different and interesting ways. And so it's great that you mentioned that and you highlighted that the notion of this inclusivity as an ethos of the African people is really strong. And so my hope is that as you talk about revitalization of Hogan's Alley, we think about the idea of inclusivity, but also we don't move to revisionism. So we're not thinking about Hogan's Alley in the 1880s, but think about this new community of people from Africa who have who will come forward in different ways, who have new understandings of the world and new visions for it. And hopefully those visions will be included in that. So thank you for those remarks and the notion that we're all in this together. Now, I'd like to call up our President of African Descent Society of British Columbia, Mr. Kebede Abati, whose organization is hosting this event. And thank you very much for all the efforts to make this possible.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today, you guys, very heavy snow, people is not coming, so we cannot fight together to weather. So, thank you again, Mr. The City of Vancouver Deputy Mayor, Bob Megas, and welcome Juliana Working President at Pan-Africa Congress, US. She is here. She's a stand-up for human rights in the world, in Africa and in North America. So today I can invite Mr. Yassin. He can tell us about African, what is going on and what is now. So I can invite Mr. Yassin here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kebede. Some of the friends who are here, thank you so much for coming. It was very, very, very hard for coming to snow time, which was in the morning today. But as a public speaker, I know that a forum is a forum, and never mind a small group of people when they come together with a concrete idea, they can create a change. That's why we are here today. I've worked in this organization as an executive director for quite maybe now 5 years, and it is the society which are organizing that festival. You know, African Descent Festival is the August society which created the African Fountain Chapel. Right now the church is about 30, 40 people. We restored that. We have revived a lot of the history that Councillor Jeff Meggs has been talking about. I didn't come to Vancouver to talk, but I came to revive the community of people of African descent. So there are other associations that people came within this society, and now they are very good. You mentioned White Campton. They are part of this community. Several different people you've seen in the community with me. Somebody came here, started from here, and they go somewhere. So that's how it is. But today I just dedicated my presentation just one of it, because I have 25 presentations in this month within the community, schools, and the government. But I said that this can go to the City of Vancouver message. The tragedy for people of African descent community in Canada can be explained to you using the parable from the Bible. The tragedy of the people of African descent in Canada can be found in the Old Testament, can be found in the New Testament. It can also be found in the Hebrew Bible, which called the promised land, or the land after Canaan, which means the land of milk, the land of honey, a promise given none by God gave it to Abraham and his descendants. The promised land was the first made to Abraham in Genesis 15:18-21, then confirmed to his son Isaac, Genesis 26:3, and then to Isaac's son Jacob, Genesis 28:13. Abraham's grandson. The promised land was described in terms of the territory from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates River, Exodus 23-31. A smaller area of a former Canaanite land and the land east of Jordan River was conquered and occupied by the descendants, the Israel, after Moses led to the Exodus out of Egypt. That information can be found in the Bible, chapter 34, 1-12. And this occupation was interpreted to God's fulfillment of his promised land. In the Bible, Deuteronomy 1-8, he said that Moses anticipated that God might subsequently give the Israelites the land reflecting the boundaries of God's original promise. If they were obedient, God was ready to provide the land. The concept promised land is the central dream of my presentation today to you, and the message you can take home tonight, whose discourse suggests that modern Jews descend from the Israeli and the land of the promised land through which they were promised to the right establish their national homeland from slavery. Why do we remind ourselves this reality from God? Because 380 years, the Negro who came to Canada under underground railway movement, under the invitation of Sir Douglas in the Western Canada, under the promises of United Empire Loyalists, the Crown, they came to Canada as refugees. They were invited to fight on the front line for the Crown on the promise of giving a land to be free. Canada was a promised land to free black slaves during the Jim Crow laws, led by over 40,000 population, 200 slaves who came from the United States to come here. Freeing slavery to Canada on the promise that land described the land of Canaan. Canada was a beacon of hope, refugee haven from slavery, where they could pursue nothing freely without just full honor and the promise of farmland in the agreement of the black and the accepting fighting the war, different wars, the war 1812, the war 1782. Black were on the front line on the war 1945, and they were front line on the war 1914. But 300 years, 89 score years ago, since 1628, a great Canadian, Olivier Lajeunesse, who was the first slave to be brought to this country, Canada, in the New France. In 1958, Sir Douglas, a descendant of who acted as Moses, I've already talked about this in this presentation. He invited black people, Mifflin Gibbs, Alexander Nance and others. 600 men came to Ireland, and he didn't promise anything apart from the land. Canada was a promised land. Canada was a land of hope. Canada was a land of glory. bye-bye, our slave masters, we never came back to you anymore. Those are some of the songs the slaves sang when they are living in the United States. Some black people came from Amber Valley in northern Alberta, Edmonton. They settled in downtown East Side. They were also established, contributed in the establishment of Organization. Other black people came from Brandon in Manitoba, yet others in Salt Spring Island, Shadow Creek Sea Gardens in Victoria, and then they landed here in Vancouver, which they called the land, the political mecca, the mecca of unemployed people. That's what they described this city. They did what they can in 1885. Joy Fortis and the Scully family in downtown East Side, they established the Scully Para, a chicken house. They established businesses in downtown East Side. Joy Fortis left the Scully family, the Martha families, and then he went to downtown West Side, where he became so famous to become an instructor for swimming. And the reality that 1886, Joy Fortis, he served the United States ambassador in the swimming. He was made the best friend of Canadian forever. Vice Chicken Steakhouse, it was there in downtown East Side. Prayer Restaurant, it was there in downtown East Side. Mother Playa, Mother Alexander Restaurant, they were all in downtown East Side, as much as many entertainment, New Country Club, New Orleans Club, they were all here. They attracted many great Americans whose symbolic figure we have already seen in entertainment, like Jimi Hendrix, Louis Armstrong, Little Richard, Nat King Cole, and many others, as well as Anne King, who went to establish different entertainment clubs in downtown East Side to demonstrate that the black people were ready to contribute and they were ready to be part of this community. Black made many significant heritage legacy, which I call demystifying the heritage of the presence and the heritage of people of African descent in this city. The Amber Valley Edmonton team, which was established to be one of the best football clubs. The Vancouver baseball team, it was part of this community. They were all here, as well as other notable African Americans that we have seen here. Nora Hendricks, Jimi Hendrix, we have had Emily Barnes, Rosemary Brown. They were all here part of this community. They contributed politically, economically, socially, and they lived in the part of this multiculturalism. But 100 years later, black people have lived since 1885 in this city, have nothing to show that they are part of this neighborhood. 100 years later, even though the black people struggled to create their neighborhood, they are still living in the part of just poverty, in the lonely island of poverty. Segregation is still exists in terms of employment, discrimination at work. They still facing these issues, including police brutality. They still exist, this reality in the city. 100 years later, the establishment of urban renewal that is created the viaduct below here could not given any chance for a black man to stand what he created, what he called the ghetto, the squalor, the neighborhood that he created. That was the only way that the viaduct targeted the weakest neighborhood, and that was the only way the black community had to live. 100 years later, we have known that African people's existence in this city, they comprise a population over 2,000, but today, even though they are, we cannot see anymore. They had theaters, they had new country clubs, they had everything. They were here, and they did what they can do to survive. But 100 years later again, the Africans' lives in Vancouver has demonstrated that they can't do anything and the system cannot accept them. The system cannot allow them to grow. The barriers they have created around them, they cannot allow them to metamorphose into a sense of community. Even Hogan Izali is a part of mind to argue whether there were some presence of African people there, whether they exist in the reality. But the reality is, as I already said, that London Drug was part of Hogan Izali neighborhood. 3 vets were part of Hogan Izali. These are multi-millionaire companies today, but they are owned by Canadians. The question today we need to ask ourselves, what happens to the black people, 500, 2,000 that lived in Stuart Corner today? We can't see them. The business enterprises they owned, they can't see. Even the music they used to play in the theater, it is no more. I sometimes think that maybe there was a discretion, which I think that maybe the viaduct was targeted policy by the Non-Partisan Association to remove some of the unwanted racialized group. And the matter of fact, as I said, that we had different views with some people who have been Africans been working on this issue. But I told them there was a policy in 1918 that the city of Vancouver mayor, that time he made that policy, remove the unwanted racial group here. It was there. 100 years, the Negro is still languishing in the corner of the Canadian society and find himself in the exile of his own land, the lonely poverty island. 100 years later, the heritage of African people of African descent, the cultural aspect is still a struggle to demystify their contribution into Canadian society. In Vancouver particularly, we all have to know that the picture I've already put there in the exhibition, Josephine Sullivan, she is in the City Hall of Vancouver. She was among the people at that time, 1886, which signed the proclamation of this city. But she has no any space in this city.